Well, good afternoon, everyone. How are you all doing today? Good. I'd like to hear that. And thank you very much, Chancellor Christensen. I appreciate the introduction. Chancellor Christensen and I actually have known each other for a number of years, and he was one of the first people I spoke with in higher education when I was starting my campaign out a couple of years ago. So thank you very much for your advice and guidance then as well. I was asked to speak today about the future and why rural matters. And if you think about our state, it should be obvious, but I will tell you that's one of the things that we're going to have to work on is that for folks, especially in Lincoln and Omaha, it may not be. But let me tell you why it matters first. It matters because we're Nebraska. We grow things and we make things. That's what we do. Agriculture is our largest industry. 25% approximately of our economy is related directly to production agriculture. It drives our economy, the number of people we employ, and it's the heart and soul of what we do here in our state. There are probably maybe one state that I can think of that is as dependent on agriculture as we are. And manufacturing is our second biggest industry segment. That's where the make things comes from. And that's important. We'll talk about that as well. So agriculture is a huge part of what we do here in this state. And if you look at this last recession in 2008, Nebraska weathered that quite well compared to other states. And that was in large part because agriculture had done so well. You know, when you see corn go up to $7 or $8, that makes a big difference in our economy. And if you look at where our future lies, you just have to look at the world. And I'm going to steal a line from Ronnie Green here because he did this at the actually the Governor's Ag Conference a couple of years ago, and I like the line and I've been repeating it ever since, and when he's around I actually give him credit for it. That by 2050 there will be 2 billion more people on the face of the earth. And because of rising standards of living, we will have to produce 100% more food. 70% of that will have to come from productivity and innovation. Well, folks, our farmers and ranchers are the most productive, innovative people in the world. We are ideally situated right here in Nebraska to be able to take advantage of that trend. We have to put the things in place to be able to do that. Right now, we are number one when it comes to cattle on feed. And the cattle industry is our single biggest industry here in the state. We're number 2 in ethanol production, number 3 in corn production, number 4 when it comes to the overall largest agricultural state. We're the largest irrigated state in the country. Agriculture is what's going to drive our economy and our growth. And that's why it's so important what the university is doing here in the Rural Futures Institute and the Water for Food Institute as well. Focusing on the things that are going to matter to Nebraska. And that's why I want to thank everybody who's here today to be a part of this. Because figuring out how we solve our problems with regard to growing agriculture in our rural communities is going to be key for us as a state to continue to grow. So what are some of the things that we have to do to be able to do that? Well, as we look at agriculture, we need to make sure that we continue to get young people involved. And we've got great programs along those lines. The 100 Beef Cow Advantage program, the 100 Acre program. I just read a statistic that 99% of the young people we help in those programs are actually still in agriculture. And that 91% of them say that those programs have helped them. So that's a great start, getting young people involved. But we also know technology is changing agriculture. All you have to do is go sit inside a modern combine, you'll know that's true. It looks almost like a spaceship now. It's pretty cool. And I just think about my grandpa. My grandpa was a farmer. He farmed about 400 acres, which at the time was about what one man could do by himself. And now my second cousin, my mom's first cousin, is a farmer, and he's doing about 1,600 acres, about the same area in Nebraska, which is not big, but about what he can do as one man by himself. And so just in one generation, you see that because of productivity, you've seen a 4x increase about what one person can do. And that's just one small example. And so we've got to have other areas to be able to develop in our rural communities. And I mentioned manufacturing is our second biggest industry. Well, that's a key to be able to focus on as well, because manufacturing allows us to create jobs all across our state, not just in Lincoln and Omaha. You know, and if you think about companies like Becton Dickinson and Broken Bow, they just actually added on to their staff there. They added on about 100 people, so now they're up to 500 people in Broken Bow, a town of about 3,500. Or think of Reinke Manufacturing in Deschler, where they employ 600 people out of a town of 800 people. Or Orthman Manufacturing in Lexington. And you can go on and on about our great Nebraska companies that are creating jobs in our small towns and rural communities. And what a fantastic opportunity that is to be able to create the jobs that will help contribute to that quality of life in our small towns and rural communities. Now, whether you're talking about agriculture or manufacturing, we've got to continue to focus on how we develop that workforce. And there's a lot of great news stories around the state to look at. For instance, at the Nebraska College for Technical Agriculture, Curtis, our enrollment up there is up 33%. That's fantastic, being able to train that next generation of farmers and ranchers. The average age of our producer in our state right now is about 55. And so we got to make sure we keep bringing those new people in. And of course, where the farm economy's gone over the last few years has certainly helped draw people in. When it comes to manufacturing, every manufacturer I talk to tells me they cannot find enough skilled labor. And so we need to continue to work on workforce development solutions. In my administration, I've started a grant program to work with private sector companies to help develop those curriculums in our schools. We just issued 2 grants, one in Kearney to Hallman Media, which you're probably familiar with. And they are going to be working with the Kearney Public Schools to reach about 1,000 kids talking about technology. Another one in Hastings is going to be working with FlowServe to be able to talk about manufacturing as early as 7th and 8th grade. And I think that's important to expose our kids at a young age to those opportunities they have in those fields. I also look at some of the great programs that are going on around the state. And again, this is the key here is involving the private sector and tailoring the programs to the specific needs of that community. So if you look at, for instance, York High School, they're working with Reinke Manufacturing to create a certification program, and they're also working with Central Valley Ag, so that kids attending York High School in their junior and senior years can take, and they're also working, by the way, with the Nebraska College for Technical Agriculture in Curtis on this program as well, to create a certification program for either a irrigation technician or chemical ag applicator, so that those kids can graduate on Friday with that certificate and start work on Monday in jobs that pay anywhere between $35,000 and $50,000 a year. Now, when I told those York High School students they could graduate on Friday and start work on Monday, they didn't seem to be too keen on that idea. But I assured them their parents would be very keen on that idea. But the thing about that certification program is they could also use that certification as dual credit to apply toward their 2-year degree or their 4-year degree. And those are the kind of opportunities we want to see created all across the state to make sure young people have that leg up when it comes to getting into agriculture or manufacturing, or especially if you take the example I just gave, manufacturing careers that relate directly to agriculture. So those are great opportunities for us to be able to develop the workforce for the next generation, and we've got to have that. In Albion, for the Boone County schools, it's a little bit smaller scale, but they're working with the local community to develop internships so that those high school kids can work in local businesses and see what those jobs are like. And that's important because we want to make sure our young people know that they've got the opportunities in their hometowns if they want to stay there or if they want to come back there. Now, education's got to be part of it, and again, that's why I compliment the University of Nebraska, what we're doing here at the Rural Futures Institute, what we're doing in our schools, whether it's going to be with Curtis, working with different high schools or different high schools programs, helping get the private sector involved in that curriculum. But as I talk to economic development people, they talk about the things, the decisions young people make when they're talking about coming back to their hometown or staying into their hometown. First of all, it's jobs for both spouses. And again, that's where I think it's critical that we look at developing manufacturing as well as agriculture. Then it's connection to family, and we here at the state probably can't do too much on that one. You either got that connection to the hometown or not. But then the third thing, which is vital, which is quality of life. How do we continue to develop quality of life to make sure that our young people stay in their small town or move back to their small town? And that involves access to health care, shopping, restaurants, but all those are supported by those good paying jobs. If you've got that job in manufacturing that has health care benefits with it, then you can afford to pay for your insurance, and then you've got the hospital taken care of. And that also supports the local coffee shop. Now, one of the areas I think we do have more work to do on has to do with housing, because that is a consistent theme I've heard, is how can we do more with regard to making sure we've got the right housing stock in our small towns and rural communities. And there's a variety of different solutions here. So just like with education, it's going to be up to the local community to be able to decide what works best. And this is where the state can really work with those local communities that leverage the resources of the state, but to create a local solution. So for instance, in Sydney, you've got Cabela's, and they are actually developing their own subdivision to make sure they got housing. Now, obviously that's not going to work everywhere, but that's a solution. In Fairbury, there's a group of local business people who got together, pooled their money to start buying houses, renovating them, sell the house, and then buy the next house and renovate it, creating a revolving fund, so to speak. And in that case, they're just creating more housing stock one at a time. In Broken Bow, 5 banks got together and created a fund to create low-interest loans for developers, so that that would lower their bar there for them taking that risk of building housing in their community. In fact, they just finished a 24-unit apartment complex with a developer who got through the help of that loan. Now, it's a loan, they still have to pay it back, but it's a low interest rate that helps remove the risk for that developer. Again, talking to Reinke in Deschler, they would like to build their own housing as well, but part of what we're doing at the state is putting up roadblocks through regulation. So that's where we at the state can help reduce that regulatory burden to be able to help companies find the housing they need. And this is where, again, that we need to work with local communities to develop local solutions on how we can leverage the resources of the state to best be able to meet the needs of housing, or whatever that solution is going to be, as we're looking at how we create that quality of life. I mentioned access to health care. We have to continue to support our rural hospitals through the Critical Access Program. That's one of the things that supports about 67 hospitals here in Nebraska to make sure they get reimbursed at a rate that will allow them to keep their doors open. So that's a vital thing to work, again, with the state and our federal delegation to make sure that we keep those critical access hospitals open, because that quality of life involves making sure we've got access to access to that care. We've got a variety of things that we have to do. We have to also grow our opportunities. And this is where, again, I'll borrow lines that have come from our Department of Agriculture or other people in agriculture. 95% of the world's consumers lie outside our borders. We have to go out there and get them. We have to expand our opportunities. Again, at state government, what I've been doing is trying to open up those doors through trade missions. In the spring, I went over to Europe and talked with members of the European Union about how can we get some relief from their regulatory burden when it comes to our innovations in biotechnology, for instance, or the quotas on the amount of beef that we can export to the European Union. And working with the people we're already doing business with to thank them for their business and let them know we want them to expand their business here with Nebraska. We also went to New York, which you can kind of consider a foreign country, and promoted Nebraska beef as the best beef in the world. Again, branding Nebraska beef with restaurants who use that as a competitive advantage. And then perhaps the biggest opportunity we have is looking at Asia. I just got back from a trip not too long ago to Japan and China. Japan is our third largest trading partner behind Canada and Mexico. We import about 20% of our beef exports there. That's about $276 million annually. About 50% of our pork exports go to Japan. It's about $235 million. And the 5-year average for selling corn in Japan is about $300 million. So you can see these are big numbers. And the opportunity to expand that is huge. Japanese diets are changing. They want more meat in their diet. So how can we sell more to them? I also went to China. China actually currently blocks our beef imports. And so that's an opportunity to be able to open that up. And we talked with their Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and their Ministry of Commerce about how can we work to be able to open up those relationships, to be able to export our cattle there. We're also talking to them about a joint partnership where we can bring our manufacturers over to China, demonstrate their equipment to help them with their food security and give an opportunity for our manufacturers to be able to sell in their markets to their producers. And if you think about, those rising standards of living, well, those are going to be in Asia. That's where the opportunities are going to be. So we've got to expand our opportunities to be able to grow those, to sell Nebraska. And I can tell you one of the things I found is that while a lot of people in China know who Warren Buffett is, they don't really know a lot about Nebraska. So we've got to do a better job of presenting ourselves to the rest of the world and making that case for why they should buy our products. And again, that's how we get to expand what we can do here in Nebraska. That rising population, our strength in agriculture, it's a natural fit, but it won't happen by accident. It's only going to happen if we work at it. The other side of the foreign trade is getting that investment back into Nebraska. Japan is actually our largest direct foreign investor in the state. Since 2010, over $4.4 billion. Right here in Lincoln, Kawasaki's had a relationship with Nebraska for over 40 years and employs 2,000 people here. But I was also talking with Itochu, which is one of the second largest Japanese trading firm. They just made a $50 million investment in a biodiesel plant in Beatrice. So we have the opportunity to get that foreign investment back here in the state, especially in the areas where we're strong, food and food processing, biofuels, biochemicals, to be able to create jobs here in Nebraska. And I see the chancellor standing up, which means I'm running out of time. But the good news is I'm about finished. The good news is I'm about finished. So the last thing we have, so we've talked about a lot of the areas that we have to focus on to be able to grow agriculture and manufacturing, which are the things that are going to drive our state's economy and why rural Nebraska matters. But one of the things that we cannot forget that we've got to do a much better job on is just think about our changing demographics as well. And I think about my family, because it's pretty typical. My grandfather was a farmer. I've got cousins that are still farmers. But if you look at all the grandkids that came from my grandpa, most of us are living in urban environments now. Even in Nebraska, more and more people are getting farther and farther away from that direct connection to the farm or ranch. And that means that we've got to do a better job of educating our urban consumers about where food comes from. We've got to figure out creative ways to make sure that right here in Nebraska, people understand the importance of agriculture to our overall economy, why it matters. Because even here in Lincoln, in Omaha, we've got a lot of people who take it for granted. I grew up in Omaha, and I can tell you that Omaha tends to be kind of insular. They don't necessarily think about the rest of the state. So we've got to do a better job of communicating out to those folks about where food comes from, why it's so important, what we do, what drives the state economy. Help educate our own citizens, first of all. One of the great examples, and I'm running out of time, so I'll just throw this one out real quick. You can go look it up. Farmland, the movie. There's actually a producer from Nebraska in that movie. It does a great job of humanizing the face of agriculture. And this is important because if we don't go out and talk about the people in agriculture, we have people who are working against us to try and describe, and this is one of the things we found in Europe, is the perception is because our farms and ranches are so much bigger, they're big corporate farming. Whereas the reality is, 97% or 99% of our farms are family owned. Our farms and ranches are family owned. But in Europe, the perception was we're all big corporate farms, and that's why they don't like us. Now, our farms are much bigger. In Italy, the average size of a farm was 20 acres. So you can see it's a very different approach to agriculture. We have to educate people about our family farms and ranches, what a great job they do of being good stewards of the land because they want to pass it on to the next generation, how they were the original conservationists for that very reason, what a great job they do taking care of the land and their animals. We have to do that because if we don't, somebody else is going to tell that story and they're not going to tell it in a way that's going to be complimentary to us. And it starts right here on our own, very own state. And so that's one of the challenges I'll throw out to all of you is to think about how do we tackle that problem here, starting in our own backyard. So thank you all very, very much for being here today. Again, I want to can't compliment enough the University of Nebraska for the Rural Futures Institute and all the things they're doing to help grow agriculture in our state. It is what we do. We grow things here in Nebraska. And that's the foundation of our economy. We've got to look to continue to be innovative because the world will change. But the opportunities are limitless with where this world is going, those populations that will demand a higher quality of food, more meat in their diet. That is our wheelhouse. That is where we have a strength to take advantage of that and grow our state to create even better futures for the people of Nebraska. And that's why I'm so excited to be your governor, because our opportunities are limitless by working together. So thank you all again very much for the opportunity to be here today. Thank you very much for being here at this conference, and thank you for what you do to make Nebraska the best place in the world to live, work, and raise a family. Enjoy the weekend.